Imagine living in an isolated farmhouse in the Bavarian countryside. One night, you hear footsteps in the attic, but when you search, there's no one there. The next morning, you notice a trail of footprints in the snow leading straight to your door, but not a single one going back. You'd probably call the police, right? But the Gruber family didn't. And within days, every single one of them would be brutally murdered. This is the chilling story of the Hinterkaifeck murders, a crime so strange, so terrifying, that even 100 years later, investigators and historians are still arguing about what really happened. But here is the most unsettling part. What investigators discovered inside that farmhouse suggests the killer didn't just murder the family. He stayed. He lived there, ate their food, and cared for their animals. And maybe even watched the neighbors as if nothing had happened. Who could do such a thing? And how has this case stayed unsolved for over a century? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, we'll explore the most disturbing theories. And one of them might just convince you that the killer's identity was always hiding in plain sight. The year is 1922. Germany is in chaos. World War I has ended, but the scars are everywhere. Poverty, hunger, and anger. Bavaria, where our story takes place, is a hotbed of political unrest. The seeds of extremism are being planted. In the midst of this unrest stands Hinterkaifeck Farm, about 43 miles north of Munich. Built in the 1860s, it was home to the Gruber family. Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, with Cecilia, his 72-year-old wife. Their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, a 35-year-old widow. Victoria's 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph, and their maid, who changed not long before the murders. On the surface, just another farming family, but behind the doors of Hinterkaifeck, there were secrets, and these secrets may hold the key to understanding why 6 people ended up dead. Andreas Gruber was no kindly old farmer. He was infamous for his violent temper. Neighbors whispered about how he locked his children in the freezing cellar for days as punishment. One daughter, Sophie, died after his brutal treatment. Andreas had already been imprisoned for a crime almost unthinkable: incest. He had been abusing his daughter, Victoria. It was known in the village. Both he and Victoria had been convicted. And here's the disturbing twist. Some believe that Victoria's youngest child, Joseph, wasn't fathered by her late husband at all, but by Andreas himself. Others believed another man was the father, and if that was true, it could have been the motive for murder. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because before the murders, the Grubers experienced months of strange, almost supernatural signs. It started with the maid. 6 months before the murders, she suddenly quit. Why? Because she swore the house was haunted. She claimed to hear footsteps in the attic when no one was there. Whispering, movement. Always at night. Andreas dismissed her fears. But not long after, other bizarre events unfolded. A strange newspaper appeared on the property. No one in the family bought it. No one in the village subscribed to it. A house key vanished without a trace, and then came the footprints. In late March 1922, after a snowfall, Andreas spotted tracks in the snow leading from the forest directly to the farm. They ended at a broken lock on the machine shed, but there were no footprints going back. That same night, the family heard footsteps in the attic. Andreas searched, but the house was empty. He told neighbors about these things, but when they begged him to call the police, Andreas refused. Why? Was it pride, fear, or did he already suspect who it was? On March 30th, just one day before the murders, Victoria fled into the forest after a violent argument with her parents. She was found hours later, shaken. The very next day, March 31st, a new maid arrived at the farm. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. Her sister walked her to the property. That sister may have been the last outsider to see the Gruber family alive. That night, something horrifying unfolded in the barn. One by one, members of the family were lured from the house into the dark stable. Andreas, his wife Cecilia, Victoria, and little Cecilia were each ambushed and bludgeoned with a mattock, a heavy farm tool. Then, the killer entered the house. 2-year-old Joseph was murdered in his crib. The maid, Maria, was killed in her bed. 6 people. Gone. But this was only the beginning of the nightmare. The murders happened on March 31st, but the bodies weren't discovered until April 4th. And during those 4 days, someone stayed at the farm. The animals had been fed. The cows milked, meals cooked and eaten. Even the calendar had been updated. The page for March 31st was torn off, revealing April 1st. Whoever killed the family carried on living in their home as if nothing had happened. Now here's where it gets disturbing. Several neighbors had visited the farm in those days. A mechanic worked on a machine for hours, never seeing anyone. Coffee sellers knocked on the door, saw the open gate, and left. All the while, the killer could have been watching them from the attic or the barn loft. It wasn't until April 4th, when concerned neighbors finally forced entry, that the full horror was revealed. When the men entered the barn, they froze, for bodies lay crumpled, partially covered with hay. Andreas, his wife, Victoria, and little Cecilia. Inside the house, the maid and baby Joseph were found dead in their rooms. The brutalities shocked even hardened investigators. The autopsies revealed horrifying details. Victoria had been strangled and bludgeoned. 7-year-old Cecilia had survived her initial injuries and lived for hours, pulling out tufts of her own hair in agony before dying. Andreas's wound was so precise, it nearly severed his artery instantly. And yet, despite the carnage, nothing was stolen. Piles of money remained untouched. This wasn't a robbery. This was something far more personal. But who could have done it? Theories exploded across Bavaria. As the husband returned from the dead, Victoria's husband, Karl Gabriel, was believed to have died in World War I. But his body was never found. Some claimed he returned, discovered Victoria with another man, or with a child not his own, and snapped. Witnesses even reported seeing a mysterious German-speaking man in Russia after the war, who allegedly confessed to the murders. Could have been the neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer. The man who found the bodies had once been romantically involved with Victoria. Some believed he was Joseph's real father, and his behavior after the murders was suspicious, unlocking doors with a key that had supposedly gone missing, moving bodies around, and making strange comments about the crime scene. Was he looking for his son, or covering his tracks? Also, several men in the area were rumored to covet the family's wealth. Local workers, petty criminals, even traveling vagrants were questioned. But with no money missing from the farm, robbery seemed unlikely. Or maybe could Andreas have killed his own family in a fit of rage, only to be killed himself? This would explain why someone tended to the farm afterward, because Andreas had nowhere else to go. But the evidence suggests otherwise. And then, there's the most chilling theory of all. Decades later, a new idea surfaced. In the book The Man from the Train, author Bill James suggested that Hinterkaifeck might not have been an isolated event. Across the United States, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, a series of families were slaughtered in eerily similar fashion, bludgeoned with farm tools, their bodies moved, often covered afterward. The suspect, a German immigrant named Paul Müller. James believes Müller returned to Germany around 1912. If true, Hinterkaifeck could have been the final act of one of history's most prolific serial killers. But if Müller was the killer, why Hinterkaifeck? Why the Gruber family? The investigation dragged on for decades. Witnesses were questioned, suspects accused, but no one was ever charged. In 1955, the case was officially closed. Even in 1986, more than 60 years later, police questioned one last suspect. Nothing. And so, the murders of Hinterkaifeck remain an open wound in history. But here's what keeps this case alive, even today. The footsteps in the snow, the sounds in the attic, the missing key, and the fact that after the family was gone, someone continued to live among their bodies, as if nothing had happened. So, who could have been? A jealous lover, a vengeful husband thought dead, a violent patriarch finally losing control, or a wandering serial killer who slipped back into the shadows of history? We may never know, but one thing is certain. The shadows of Hinterkaifeck still linger, and its secret remains buried beneath the frozen soil of Bavaria. And if you want more deep dives into real-life mysteries just like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next chilling story.